Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. On a quiet Texas morning, I was mowing my lawn, sweat, sun, credence in my ears, when a convoy of SUVs pulled up, claiming my house was theirs. What followed wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war, and I was the last man standing between them and the truth. Saturday morning started like it usually did, with the smell of cut grass, cheap gas, and the sound of my old push mower rattling like it was one screw away from self-destruction. I was halfway through the front lawn, sweat already soaking through my shirt, earbuds in, listening to an old Creedence mix, when I saw a motion on the road just past my mailbox. 2 cars had pulled up, a slick black SUV and a white minivan with Willow Realty Group plastered on the side in tacky gold vinyl. Behind them, 2 more SUVs crept up like they were following a parade float. I pulled out one earbud and squinted. The minivan door slid open. Out stepped Karen. Yeah, that Karen. HOA Karen. The woman who'd spent the last 3 years trying to pretend that my property, sitting on its own parcel between 2 HOA zones, was somehow her jurisdiction. I'd already told her, in writing, notarized and blessed by the state of Texas, that my house was not under the rules of High Creek Bluff Estates. But there she was, marching up the gravel drive in her linen blazer and wedge heels like she was about to present a damn award. And behind her, a realtor in a blazer 2 sizes too small, a man and woman who looked like cash buyers from Dallas, and several other people with clipboards and coffee cups. A full-blown tour. Karen pushed through the gate I hadn't locked because, silly me, I didn't expect a hostile open house to take place on my property. She paused when she saw me, squinting like I was the intruder. "Oh, you're still here," she said, glancing down at her watch with all the annoyance of a hostess finding out the kitchen's behind schedule. "You had until last night at 1 a.m. to vacate. We discussed this." I stared at her, sweat dripping from my brow. "The hell we did." "Yes, we did," she snapped. "You were served. This property has been designated for transition under HOA Article 17C. It is now a communal development lot, and this is a scheduled viewing. Please don't interfere." "Lady," I said, cutting the mower, "you're trespassing, and if 1 more foot touches my grass, I'm calling the sheriff." That didn't stop her, nor did it stop the realtor, who stepped forward with a bright, fake smile and said, "Mr. Bowen, I'm Clint from Willow Realty. I'd like to thank you for your cooperation in this transition phase. We've already received preliminary offers and are expecting a strong showing this morning." I blinked at him. "You're thanking me for cooperating with the attempted sale of my not-for-sale house. Your property," Karen interrupted, "was forfeited due to non-renewal of parcel usage declaration. It defaulted into HOA jurisdiction 18 months after the last update. We have that on record." "The hell you do," I said, walking toward them. "I paid property taxes 3 days ago. I've been living here, maintaining this land, planting damn tomatoes in the backyard. This is mine, bought outright at a state auction 6 years ago." The couple standing in the driveway looked at each other. The woman lowered her sunglasses. Karen opened her folder, pulled out a paper, and waved it like a holy relic. "This is the Declaration of Forfeiture, signed by the HOA Executive Committee. According to Section 9.1, the lot was deemed inactive and was rezoned as a shared-use amenity extension." "What the hell does that even mean?" "It means," the realtor said, "that it's been offered as a future site for a meditation, pavilion, and walking trail extension. We're very excited about the vision here." I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed the sheriff's office. "Yeah, this is Jarrett Bowen out on Ridge Lane. I've got 6 strangers walking around my property claiming it's for sale. Send someone. Fast." Karen raised her voice so the others could hear. "You had your chance to vacate. We extended a 20-hour courtesy window. You didn't respond. That's on you." By then, the so-called buyers were already poking around the side yard. One guy was literally measuring the back deck. A woman in heels tiptoed across my gravel like she owned the damn place. I walked back to the gate and yanked it closed. "Nobody's going anywhere else on this property. You're done here. Unless you want to explain to the sheriff why you're selling someone else's home." Karen looked rattled for the first time. "This is highly inappropriate." "No," I said. "What's inappropriate is showing up to a man's house with a for sale sign and a lie." The realtor tried to diffuse the tension. "Look, we can all be civil here. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said. "You're standing on land I paid for in cash. That's never been under HOA control. and you're trying to sell it like it's part of your suburban empire. So either you leave now, or the cops make you." Karen narrowed her eyes and stepped closer. "You can't stop progress, Mr. Bowen. This community has spoken." "Yeah?" I said, smiling grimly. "Well, I'm not a part of your community. I'm the guy with the deed." She didn't have a response to that. I stood in the sun with my mower idle, my lawn half finished, and a pack of strangers slowly backing out of my yard like they'd accidentally wandered into someone's wedding rehearsal. The realtor looked like he'd seen a ghost. Karen, still clutching her file, glared like I'd personally ruined her retirement plan. And I waited, because the sheriff was on the way. And I wanted every second of what came next on the record. By the time the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the drive, the Texas sun had already turned my front yard into a frying pan. Karen stood near her SUV, arms crossed, the realtor pacing beside her like a man who just realized he bet on the wrong horse. The so-called buyers had retreated to their vehicles, whispering nervously, but they hadn't left. Everyone wanted to see how this show ended. When the deputy got out, I felt an immediate sense of relief. It was Deputy Latham, a guy I'd met once when he served as bailiff in the courthouse back when I was still working as a process server. Solid man, straight talker. I could see the flicker of recognition on his face as he adjusted his hat. "Morning, Jarrett," he said, scanning the small crowd. "You want to tell me what's going on here?" "Sure," I said, motioning toward Karen and her entourage. "These folks decided to host a real estate open house on my property, claiming it's been forfeited to the HOA. Karen jumped in immediately, her tone sharp and authoritative. "Deputy, this property is under the jurisdiction of High Creek Bluff Estates. Mr. Bowen was given proper notice of forfeiture due to non-renewal of land declaration. As president of the Homeowners Association, I'm obligated to secure community assets that are being neglected." Latham turned to her slowly, his brow furrowed. "Ma'am, did you say forfeiture? By what authority?" "By the authority vested in me by the HOA charter," she said proudly, producing a thick folder. "I have all the necessary paperwork. It's signed by our executive committee and verified by our compliance office." I couldn't help but snort. "Compliance office?" "That's her garage printer." The deputy shot me a warning glance, half amusement, half professionalism, then opened the folder Karen handed him. He flipped through several pages, his expression hardening the longer he looked. "This looks like a private HOA document, ma'am, not a county record. I don't see any signatures from the assessor's office or property registrar." Karen bristled. "That's because it's a community-level filing. We operate under a different jurisdictional framework. The county simply ratifies our records once they're finalized." "Uh-huh." Latham turned another page. "And when did the county ratify this one?" She hesitated. "And that process is ongoing." I grinned. Translation, never. The deputy closed the folder and handed it back. "Ma'am, this isn't a legal deed or any kind of binding transfer. You can't just decide a property belongs to you because your committee voted on it. You got anything from the county clerk's office confirming this forfeiture?" Karen's jaw tightened. "The owner has been non-compliant for 18 months. The law allows us to assume management of abandoned lots." I stepped forward holding up a printed receipt. "Here's my property tax payment, made 3 days ago through the Travis County system. Here's my recorded deed from the state auction dated 6 years back. And here's the 2024 registration renewal notice. You want to check the county database? My name's still on every line." The deputy took the papers, scanning them carefully. "Yep, everything here checks out. Paid, registered, and occupied. That's about as far from abandonment as it gets." He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, this is a private residence. You and these folks are trespassing. I'm going to need you to leave the property immediately." The realtor stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly. "Deputy, we were told this was a legitimate listing. We even have a pre-sale contract signed by Mrs. Elliott here." Latham looked at him like he'd just confessed to stealing a school bus. "Son, you're telling me you've got a sale contract for a house that isn't yours to sell?" The man's face went pale. "She said it was approved through the HOA acquisition program." "Program?" I said. "You mean fraud?" Karen shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "This isn't over. We've followed proper procedure. Our attorney will be contacting you, Deputy, and this man will be hearing from our legal team." "Great," I said. "Tell your lawyer to bring crayons so he can draw me where in the law you think you own my damn house." Latham raised a hand. "Enough. Mrs. Elliott, you and everyone else need to vacate this property right now. If you return without legal cause, you'll be cited for trespass." "Understood." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but saw the buyers already backing away, shaking their heads. The realtor muttered something about miscommunication and hurried to his van. One by one, engines roared to life. Within minutes, the convoy was gone, except for Karen, who stood by her SUV, her lips pressed so tight they looked bloodless. "This is harassment," she hissed. "You think you can humiliate me? You'll regret this." "Lady," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice, "I've dealt with worse than you on eviction jobs. You try another stunt like this, and the only regret you'll have is not knowing which prison has air conditioning." She flinched, but covered it with a smirk. "Enjoy your little victory, Mr. Bowen. It won't last." When she finally drove off, I stood there with the deputy, both of us watching the dust settle. "Jarrett," Latham said, flipping his notebook shut, "I'm filing an incident report, but I'd get a copy of that HOA paperwork. Something about it smells off." "Oh, it stinks all right," I said. "Like fraud and garden mulch." He chuckled. "Keep your paperwork handy. If she tries again, call me directly. I'll make sure the DA hears about it." When his cruiser pulled away, I looked around at my lawn, half-cut, trampled, and still littered with footprints. I restarted the mower and muttered to myself, "Hell of a morning for a real estate show." I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was worried, hell no, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done. That woman didn't get embarrassed and retreat. She regrouped, and I wasn't about to get blindsided again. So, at 6 in the morning, I was parked in front of the Travis County Property Office, thermos in hand, waiting for them to open like a man about to buy concert tickets. The clerk behind the desk was a soft-spoken guy named Elliot, who looked like he'd spent most of his career in a windowless basement filing deeds alphabetically. When I slid over my address and request, he barely blinked. "Looking for recent filings?" he asked. "Looking for any kind of fraud that might be wearing my name like a Halloween mask," I replied. 10 minutes later, he handed me a copy of my own file. My deed, tax history, registration, all of it was clean and intact. But there, tucked in a scanned page marked 2 weeks ago, was a document I'd never seen. A filing under something called a Notice of Non-Usage and Abandonment Declaration, submitted by none other than High Creek Bluff HOA Executive Committee. "What the hell is this?" I muttered. Elliot leaned over the counter, adjusted his glasses. "It's not official," he said. "It was submitted, but not ratified. County office flagged it as unauthorized and held it for review. We see a few of these each year from overreaching HOAs." The document claimed that my property was deemed inactive, citing no recorded interactions or usage confirmations by the owner within 18 months, and recommended reassignment under Article 17C for community redevelopment. Bullshit from top to bottom. "Can I get a certified copy of this?" I asked. "Sure," he said, already printing it. "You might want to speak to the zoning department, too. If they're claiming redevelopment plans, it would have passed through them." So I did. Downstairs, I spoke with a zoning officer named Lynn, sharp as a tack and twice as quick. I showed her the file. Her eyebrows shot up. "I know this case," she said. "You're the guy with the buffer property, right? The little slice between North Bluff and East Bluff?" "That's me." "Yeah," she said, flipping through her tablet. "You're not zoned for HOA jurisdiction. You're a legacy parcel from a state auction, exempt, no annexation ever filed." She paused. But that didn't stop them from trying. She showed me an internal memo. High Creek Bluff HOA had submitted 2 annexation requests in the past year, both rejected. The kicker? One of them specifically referenced my parcel number, marked as target for eventual acquisition. "They actually wrote that?" I asked, incredulous. She turned the screen. There it was, in black and white. Target for eventual acquisition and conversion to community recreational space. Status: abandoned looking, unclaimed. I stood there for a second, jaw locked. "So, they're basically trying to steal my house through paperwork," I said. Lynn gave a dry chuckle. "We've seen worse. But yeah, it's a scam, and a bold one." By noon, I was on the phone with my lawyer, Sandra Travers, former assistant DA, property rights expert, and meaner than a rattlesnake with a hangover. "I want to sue them," I said. "I want their HOA charter duct taped to a tombstone." "Calm down," she said. "Let's start with information. Forward me everything you've got." I emailed the forged filing, zoning memos, and the incident report from Deputy Latham. She called back within an hour. "They've done this before," she said. "What? Not just to you. 2 other homeowners within a 5-block radius had similar notices filed. One sold under duress, the others still in litigation. I've got contacts in the district clerk's office. Give me 2 days. That night, I went through my own home files. Every inspection, every permit, every receipt. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I also installed new motion sensors on the back gate, turned on the perimeter cameras, and locked the access panel to the power meter. I was done playing nice. The next morning, I got a text from Sandra. Call me ASAP. We have a pattern. Turns out, the notice of non-usage wasn't a one-off. It was part of a template. Same formatting, same signatures, same executive committee with fabricated names. Not a single one of those people existed in the county directory. HOA board meetings supposedly authorizing the transfers never happened. They were backdated. Some even held on days that were public holidays when the HOA office wasn't open. But the worst part? Willow Realty Group, the same agency that tried to sell my house, was also the broker on both prior forfeited sales. They were listed as exclusive residential transition partners of High Creek Bluff HOA. So, they're running a pipeline, I said. Fake abandonment notices, fake board votes, then flipping the property through their preferred realtor before the owner knows what hit them. Sandra didn't respond right away. They're gonna regret this, she said finally, because now it's not just fraud, it's systemic fraud. And if we can tie Karen to the paper trail, that's felony territory. You think the DA will take it? If we build it right, she said, the DA won't have a choice. That night, I printed 2 signs and staked them in my front yard. One read, "This is private property, not for sale, not HOA jurisdiction." The other right beneath it said, "Trespassers will be documented and prosecuted." I didn't care if it looked paranoid. I wasn't just protecting my house anymore. I was defending it from being erased. Sandra moved fast. Within 24 hours, she'd filed a public records request for all internal HOA filings and meeting minutes over the past 2 years. She didn't wait for the HOA to comply either. She served the request directly to the county registrar and zoning office, sidestepping Karen's inner circle completely. That turned out to be a smart move because the documents we got back told one hell of a story. First, there were the signatures. The executive committee who had supposedly voted to seize my property, they didn't exist. Names like Gavin Littrell, Michelle Bairn, and Trevor D. showed up across half a dozen meeting records, but none of them were registered as HOA board members. In fact, most weren't even residents. Sandra cross-referenced them with voter rolls and utility data, ghosts. No tax records, no addresses. The only commonality, all the paperwork had Karen's name on the header. Every fake meeting, every falsified vote, every decision to rezone. Next, there was the formatting. The minutes had been written in the same font, spacing, and layout, identical across months of alleged meetings. The kicker? The document metadata, Sandra checked the damn file properties, showed they were all created on the same day 3 weeks ago. It was a rush job. Sloppy, desperate. Then came the zoning permits. We found 2 formal rezoning requests filed by High Creek Bluff HOA last year. Both were rejected by the county. One of them specifically referenced my parcel number as unclaimed buffer land available for recreational reclassification. That was the same one Lynn had shown me in zoning. What we hadn't known. It was followed by a silent auction notice submitted to Willow Realty just days later, with my property listed as secured pending HOA approval. That notice was signed by Karen. Sandra nearly laughed when she saw it. They tried to auction your house like it was a repossessed boat. Meanwhile, I stayed busy. I contacted Deputy Latham and filed a formal complaint for attempted fraud, naming both the HOA and Willow Realty. I also contacted the local news, specifically a reporter named Jana Holt, who covered housing disputes and HOA abuse. She agreed to meet me at the property that weekend. I was raking the front yard when her van pulled up. She stepped out with a cameraman and a microphone, already flipping through notes. "You've made some enemies," she said by way of introduction. "But this story, it's got teeth." While her crew filmed B-roll of my property, I laid out the timeline. Property bought legally, no HOA jurisdiction, forged documents, realtors showing up with buyers. When I showed her the fake abandonment declaration and the matching signatures across multiple properties, her eyes widened. "We've seen HOA overreach before," she said. "But this is racketeering dressed in beige. The segment aired 2 nights later under the title HOA or Land Thieves. Travis County homeowner exposes shocking takeover scheme. It blew up. Hundreds of comments. People sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some claimed Karen had tried similar tactics years earlier, but they'd been too intimidated or too broke to fight back. Then the calls started. 3 neighbors reached out directly. 2 of them had nearly lost their homes to HOA reclassification. One, an older woman named Ms. Delgado, said her backyard shed had been bulldozed by an HOA contractor reclaiming community space. Another, a retired mechanic named Carl, showed me a letter he'd received claiming he had abandoned easement rights to his own driveway. Sandra filed a motion with the county court requesting an emergency injunction to halt all HOA sales, transfers, or construction initiatives within a quarter-mile radius of my property. She argued that ongoing fraud could impact more residents if not stopped immediately. The court granted it. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy delivered the injunction directly to Karen's front door. I heard from a neighbor that she slammed the door so hard it shook her porch railing, but she wasn't done. The following afternoon, I caught a man with a clipboard walking along the edge of my fence line taking photos. When I approached, he introduced himself as Ron from Oakmark Assessments, claimed he was there to update HOA property boundaries. I asked who sent him. Karen Elliott, he said casually. She said this was in transition. I smiled without humor. Ron, you might want to call your supervisor before you keep clicking. You're standing on land protected by a court injunction. He looked confused. I pulled out a printed copy and handed it to him. See that section? The part about immediate criminal liability for interference with protected parcels. That includes you. Right now. Right here. He left without another word. That night, Sandra called again. It's unraveling. The fraud filings go back 3 years. If what I think is true, this wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was a land acquisition operation, and your case just became the tip of the spear. What happens next? I asked. We file the civil suit, and we go after their whole fake paper empire. By Monday morning, Sandra had filed the civil lawsuit in Travis County Court. It named the HOA, Karen Elliott personally, and Willow Realty as co-defendants in an elaborate scheme to commit property fraud, forgery, and unlawful misrepresentation. The 43-page filing included all the fake documents, the metadata, the auction listing with my parcel number, and sworn affidavits from Carl and Ms. Delgado. But that was just the beginning. By noon, my phone was lighting up. 2 more neighbors had come forward. Both claimed their parcels had been reclaimed as community green space despite never agreeing to join the HOA. One of them, a Gulf War vet named Hank, showed up at my porch in steel-toe boots and a tattered Houston Astros cap. He shook my hand like he meant to break something and muttered, "You keep pushing. I'll back you all the way." The media attention had lit a fire. Local news aired a follow-up segment called The HOA That Went Too Far. And suddenly, I was fielding interview requests like I was running for mayor. A conservative blog picked it up, then Reddit, then a national podcast about property law. The story was growing legs, and Karen was running out of places to hide. That afternoon, she made her move. A sleek silver BMW pulled into my driveway unannounced. Karen got out wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and dark sunglasses like she was about to film a political commercial. Behind her, a second car stopped, and out stepped a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, slicked back hair, clipboard in hand. A third car parked on the street, another buyer, or maybe a lawyer. Karen didn't wait for an invitation. She marched right up to my porch, waved off my polite attempt to stop her, and said with practiced calm, "Mr. Bowen, I suggest we talk, off the record. This situation is escalating beyond necessity." I didn't move. There is no situation. There's a lawsuit. And you're in it. She forced a smile. And I'm sure you'll come to regret that. I have legal avenues too. I gestured toward the camera above my door, blinking red. Then let's have this entire chat recorded. I'll let my attorney review the footage. That shut her up for a moment. The man behind her stepped forward, extending a business card. Jonathan Price, Community Redevelopment Consultant. I believe we can reach an understanding. I took the card, read it, laughed. You work for Oakmark. Same guys who sent Ron to update boundaries? Let me guess. You're here to offer a buyout. Not a buyout, a solution, he replied smoothly. There's a vision here of unified growth, a clean HOA footprint. We can offer above market value and a severance settlement if you withdraw your complaint. I stared at him like he'd grown another head. You think this is about money? Karen folded her arms. Everyone has a price, Mr. Bowen. The smart ones take it early. That's when I lost the smile. I already paid for this land, every inch of it. Bought it fair and square, cleared it myself, restored the structure with my own 2 hands. This house isn't for sale. It never was. But you're about to lose a whole lot more than a commission. She opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of tires on gravel interrupted us. Another car was pulling in, this one marked with the Travis County Sheriff's Office insignia. Deputy Latham stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. Afternoon, folks. Just here to serve a formal notice. He handed Karen a yellow envelope. It was the court summons. Karen turned pale. Jonathan Price cleared his throat and mumbled something about rescheduling. They left without another word. That night, my inbox exploded. The county's Land Use Committee reached out for a statement. A real estate watchdog nonprofit wanted copies of the paperwork for their national archive. And then came the wild card. A former HOA accountant named Dana emailed Sandra. She claimed to have proof that Karen had been manipulating internal budgets and logging restoration projects on properties the HOA didn't own, my parcel among them. 2 days later, Dana sat down in Sandra's office and dropped a USB drive on the table. Inside, invoices, altered spreadsheets, and internal memos with Karen's signature. The files went back 4 years. One message stood out. It was a forwarded email chain titled her Property Absorption Schedule. Attached was a PDF with a map, 8 parcels. Mine was labeled Phase 1 Transitional Occupancy. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Phase 1. Meaning there were more. We were looking at a coordinated expansion plan, an HOA land grab masked as beautification and redevelopment, all built on falsified ownership claims, ghost board votes, and realtor partnerships. If Dana's documents held up, this wasn't civil fraud anymore. It was organized criminal conspiracy. Sandra contacted the Travis County District Attorney's Office. The next phase wouldn't be civil, it would be criminal. And Karen had just walked herself straight into it. The documents from Dana didn't just light a fuse, they dropped a match into a powder keg. Within 24 hours of Sandra forwarding the USB contents to the Travis County District Attorney's Office, we had a response. Not a press release, not a phone call, a subpoena. 2 plainclothes investigators from the Financial Crimes Unit knocked on my door the next morning with folders in hand, asking if I could walk them through the events from the moment Karen showed up with a buyer on my lawn. We sat on my porch for over 2 hours. I showed them everything, camera footage, the forged maps, the auction listing, the confrontation with Karen and Price, copies of my deed, and even the metadata traces Carl had helped me extract. One of them, Agent Flores, nodded grimly as she flipped through the printouts. You realize this may involve more than just your parcel, she said quietly. This looks like the early stages of an HOA-run land laundering scheme. You ever heard that term? Can't say I have, I replied. It's when a governing body illegally absorbs or declares ownership over land, then launders it through backdoor property sales, often under the guise of redevelopment or reclamation. If your suspicions about Karen are true, she's just the tip. And then they dropped the bomb. The DA's office had been tracking another HOA in the next county over with a similar pattern. Ghost meetings, sudden property transfers, forged easements. And wouldn't you know it, the same realtor Karen used had popped up there too. That same afternoon, a judge issued a temporary restraining order freezing any pending real estate transfers associated with High Creek Bluff Estates and its board. That included my property, Hank's, and 4 others flagged in Dana's files. An emergency hearing was scheduled for the end of the week. Karen didn't take the news quietly. At 5 in the evening, just as the sun was starting to slide down behind my tool shed, a black SUV pulled up across the street. Out stepped a man in a gray polo with High Creek Bluff Enforcement embroidered on the chest, one of their so-called security team. He marched up my walkway holding a clipboard and a smug expression. You're in violation of Emergency HOA Code 907, he announced, like he was delivering a verdict. This residence is non-compliant and pending reclamation. We're authorized to post notices and prepare for turnover. I didn't bother replying. I just pointed to the gate, where a large new sign now hung. Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction. Violators will be recorded and prosecuted. When he ignored it and moved to staple a bright orange notice to my fence, I clicked the latch. on my screen door and walked out with my phone already recording. "You've got about 10 seconds to remove yourself from my property," I said. "That includes the grass, the fence, and the dirt under your overpriced sneakers." The man sneered. "We're not afraid of hollow threats, sir. This land—" That's when I held up a copy of the restraining order. "You see this? That's from Judge Torres. That means any further interference from your little club will be considered contempt of court. Now back off before this becomes your personal career ender." He backed off, but not before tossing the notice on the ground like a defiant child. "This isn't over." "No," I said. "It's just getting good." The next day, a forensic analyst from the DA's office arrived to collect Karen's fake documents for evidence. While Sandra coordinated from her office, I worked with Dana and Carl to finish compiling a full timeline of events: when the first forgery appeared, how the sales were processed, who signed what and when. Dana confessed she'd been uncomfortable for years, but only recently realized how deep the rot went. Karen controlled everything, she told us. Board elections, faked, meeting minutes, fabricated. She used dead homeowners' names to fill quorum, and those who questioned her expelled from the HOA rolls. Even Carl was stunned. "That's cult behavior wrapped in bureaucracy," he muttered, scrolling through a spreadsheet filled with fraudulent signatures. Then came a twist we didn't expect. That evening, I got a call from someone identifying himself as Thomas Greer, an attorney representing one of the supposed buyers, the man Karen had brought that Saturday morning. Greer said his client had just learned that the home he was preparing to close on wasn't for sale at all. "He's not just pulling out," Greer said. "He's filing a formal complaint against Willow Realty. And if the county doesn't prosecute this as fraud, we will." I hung up with a mix of vindication and disbelief. The next 48 hours were chaos. HOA members started quitting. The Willow Realty office was swarmed by reporters. Karen? She disappeared. Literally. When sheriff's deputies went to serve the official criminal summons, she was gone. Her car was missing. Her phone disconnected. Word was she'd cleaned out the HOA emergency fund, nearly $60,000, and vanished. Her neighbors claimed they hadn't seen her in 2 days. For a moment, I thought she'd fled the state, but I wasn't worried. Sandra said the warrant would go federal if she didn't show for the hearing. And when she did surface, she'd wish she hadn't. By Thursday morning, Karen's face was on every local news channel. HOA president vanishes amid fraud investigation scrolled across the bottom of the screen. I watched it while sipping my coffee, wondering how many skeletons she'd tried to bury and how many were now clawing out. That same afternoon, I got a call from Sandra. "They found her," she said. "She tried to cross into Louisiana using her sister's ID. U.S. Marshals picked her up outside Shreveport. By evening, she was in a county holding cell awaiting arraignment on 8 felony counts, including real estate fraud, document forgery, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Bail was denied, and just like that, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the odd man out anymore. I was the whistleblower. Reporters knocked at my door. HOA members, former ones, left letters in my mailbox apologizing, claiming they'd been in the dark. One even offered to mow my lawn as a gesture of peace. I declined. Friday, we had the emergency hearing. I wore a plain suit. Karen, escorted in cuffs, didn't look half as powerful without her clipboard. The judge laid out the charges, the restraining orders, and made one thing crystal clear. My land had never been part of the HOA. The forged documents, inadmissible and criminal, the judge said. By the end, the court ruled that all actions taken by High Creek Bluff Estates regarding my property were voided. The HOA board was placed under state supervision. Karen's assets were frozen. And the buyers, they filed civil suits of their own. Outside the courthouse, I finally allowed myself a full breath. I wasn't just defending my lawn anymore. I'd exposed an entire rotten system, one forged signature at a time. They tore down the open house signs the following Monday. A city crew, acting under a court directive, removed the illegal signage, realtor banners, and that ridiculous temporary gate Karen had installed across my driveway. I stood at the edge of my porch, arms crossed, watching every board hit the bed of a flatbed truck, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had waited a long time for justice to swing a hammer. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout unfolded like clockwork. The real estate company involved in the scam lost its license statewide. Karen's accounts were seized, and investigators found transactions linking HOA funds to a private bank in Arizona. Apparently, she'd been siphoning money for years under fake landscaping contracts. The total damages, over $700,000. The state filed for restitution on behalf of the victims. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was officially recognized as the lead plaintiff in the criminal case. Her trial came fast. With her own board turning state's witness to avoid jail time, Karen had nowhere to run. She sat in court, stone-faced, shoulders drawn, while her forged committee votes, doctored property maps, and fake meeting minutes were projected on a big screen. The prosecution didn't need theatrics. The evidence sang. She got 15 years. No parole. Real estate fraud, conspiracy to defraud homeowners, and falsification of county records. I was there for the verdict. She didn't look at me when they let her out. I didn't need her to. After the sentencing, I finally had the perimeter fence installed. Wrought iron, black, 12 feet tall, with cameras on every post. Not because I was scared, but because I was done playing games with people who saw private property as something optional. And on that fence, right at the gate, I hung a solid copper sign with thick, engraved lettering. This is not your HOA's backyard. Trespassers will face federal charges. People still slow down when they drive past. Some probably remember the story. Others are just curious. Doesn't matter. This house isn't a listing. This land isn't up for discussion. And me? I'll be out front every Saturday at 9 a.m. in shorts and a tank top mowing my own damn grass.